Marco Polo, His Travels and Adventures, Chapter 1, Part 1, The Return of the Wanderers. Beautiful as Venice now is, in the days of its stagnation and decay, it was a yet more beautiful city 7 centuries ago. Then its quays and Grand Canal were crowded with the ships of every nation. Its bazaars and marts were bustling with active trade, and were picturesque in the mingling of the gay and brilliant costumes of the East with the more sober attire of the European peoples. Its noble and lofty palaces, not yet, as we now see them, hoary and dilapidated, rose in fresh splendor from the verge of its watery and winding streets. The dome of St. Mark's shone with new gilding, and its walls with recent frescoing. The piazza was nightly crowded with throngs of gallant nobles and cavaliers, long-bearded, prosperous merchants, and bevies of fair dames, whose black veils swept from their fair foreheads to their dainty feet. Venice was not only a queen among commercial cities, but a great warlike power, with brave and well-disciplined armies, hardy captains, formidable fleets, and proud strongholds, where, on either shore of the sparkling Adriatic, she held her own valiantly against Turk, Austrian, and Genoese. Mighty princes sought the hands of the daughters of Venice in marriage. The doges who ruled over the stately city were greeted by emperors and kings as their brothers and equals. The conquests of Venice reached to Asia and to Africa. Her ships rode the purple waters of the Mediterranean in haughty defiance of the galleys of her rivals. Around the patriarchal doges was gathered a gorgeous court. There were feastal days when the Grand Canal, bordered by palaces on either side, was crowded thick with gilded and canopied barges, and interminable lines of gondolas, each gay craft filled with richly attired cavaliers and dames, on whom jewels sparkled, and above whom rose many-colored banners that announced their rank and station, while, after nightfall, the air was alive with the most dazzling fireworks, which fairly hid moon, stars, and the heavens' canopy from view. It is in Venice, at this period of her greatness and glory, that our story opens. A mellow, hazy autumn day was drawing to its close. The sky was lit with that soft, rich, yellow sunset glow, which has always been remarked as one of the loveliest sights to be seen at Venice. The last rays of the sun glittered upon the gilded dome of St. Mark's. The broad square before the ancient cathedral was beginning to fill with its evening multitude of cavaliers and coquettes. In the Grand Canal and the glassy lagoon beyond, the gondoliers lazily plied their long oars or rested their gondolas on the still waters. It was an hour in which whatever there was of activity and bustle in Venice became indolent and tranquil, when men and women sought their ease under a sky which compelled serenity and reverie. In the bazaars on the Rialto and the Piazza, the stalls were laden with bunches of large and luscious grapes, with figs of many colors, so ripe that the gummy juice oozed from them, and with pomegranates upon whose cheeks glowed the rich red bloom which betrayed their full ripeness. And there was scarcely to be seen a Venetian of the lower class who was not munching some of the succulent fruit which its climate produced in such cheap and varied abundance. Not far from the center of the beautiful city, on one of the many canals which serve it instead of streets, stood a lofty mansion, which, at one's first approach, seemed two. 3 stories in height, it towered above many of the surrounding buildings, and between its 2 wings stood an archway, richly decorated with scrolls and figures of animals, surmounted by an ornate cross, while above the archway rose a tall, square tower. Entering the archway, you would have found yourself in a spacious paved courtyard, which the house, quadrangular in shape, completely enclosed. The inner walls were adorned, like the archway, with sculptured devices, among which you might have observed a coat of arms comprising a shield with a wide bar running across it, upon which were graven 3 birds. The whole mansion was stately and imposing, and beckoned that its possessors were at once rich and of high rank. On the late afternoon which has been described, an unusual bustle was going on in and near this house. It was full of gaily dressed people, old and young, all of whom were evidently in a state of excitement. Servants hurried to and fro in the corridors. In the pretty balconies which were built at the windows facing the canal of San Giovanni Crisostomo were gathered groups of cavaliers and ladies, who were leaning over and peering eagerly out to the end of the watery thoroughfare, as if they were anxiously expecting an arrival. In the main hall of the mansion, a vast apartment, approached from the courtyard by a broad flight of stone steps, and entered by a high and richly sculptured portal, stood a knot of persons who seemed even more excited than the rest. One was a tall and dignified man, clad in a long blue cloak, his head covered by a slashed blue and white cap, from which rose an ostrich feather. He wore a long brown beard, just streaked with gray. His dark face was flushed, and every moment he approached the door and questioned the servants posted in the courtyard. On either side of him stood two youths, one 15 and the other 13, both very richly attired, and both the very pictures of boyish freshness and beauty. The elder was tall for his age, and his form was straight, graceful, and well knit. A pair of bright gray eyes, a nose rather longer than medium, red full lips, and a handsome round chin comprised his features. The expression of his face was at once energetic and pleasing. His movements were quick and nervous, and every now and then he turned to the cavalier beside him and talked rapidly in a strong, musical voice. The younger boy, while he closely resembled his brother, was of more gentle mold and manners. The one seemed made to be a warrior, to play an active, perhaps a heroic part in the struggling world. The other appeared born to be a courtier, to shine in the society of elegant women, to be rather a favorite of the polite world than a man of deeds. While the younger clung to the cavalier's arm with sort of air of dependence, the elder bore himself erect, as if quite able to take care of himself. All at once, loud and joyous cries were heard from the balconies in front of the house, and presently down rushed their occupants into the hall, whither all the others who were in the house flocked in a twinkling. "They are coming! They are coming!" were the words that went eagerly around. The two lads were seized and embraced by the ladies. The elder's eyes kindled with delight as he hurried to the door. His brother danced up and down and clapped his hands, while tears of happiness flowed over his rosy cheeks. In the courtyard there was the greatest noise and confusion. The retainers of the household gathered in 2 rows at the archway, while the steward, a portly personage, in a tunic, with a heavy chain around his neck and a long staff in his hand, passed out upon the landing to welcome the newcomers. He was soon seen returning, walking backwards and bowing as he came almost to the ground. In another moment, the travelers who had been so anxiously awaited slowly walked through the archway and greeted the excited group before them. A strange appearance, indeed, did the two tall, bronzed men present to those who were gazing at them. Instead of the rich and elegant Venetian costume of the day, their forms were covered with what seemed rough and barbarous garments. From their shoulders to their feet, they were arrayed in long, loose gowns or great coats, one of them made of shaggy fur, while on their heads were fur caps. Their feet were encased in rude shoes, which turned up at the toes, while at their sides, instead of the long, slender Venetian sword, hung broad, heavy, curved scimitars. In their hands they carried stout sticks. Slung across their shoulders were long, furry bags. Not less strange were their faces. Both wore long, shaggy, grizzled hair, which fell in thick masses to their shoulders. The beards of both were long and tangled, and covered their cheeks almost to their eyes. Their skin was rough and brown, and here and there a seamed scar beckoned that they had met with fierce and savage enemies. No sooner had they appeared than the elder of the two boys pushed his way through the crowd, which parted to let him pass, and rushed up to the newcomers as if to throw himself into the arms of one of them. But when he came close to them, he suddenly stopped short. In place of the light of joy, a puzzled and pained expression came across his handsome face. He looked first at one and then at the other, peered into their countenances, and seemed quite at a loss which to embrace first. His trouble, however, was soon relieved. The stouter and evidently the elder of the travelers advanced and folded him in his arms. "Surely," said he in a hoarse, low voice, "this is my beloved Marco. No wonder you did not know me, child, for when I went away you were but an infant, 6 years old. And how has it been with you? Thank heaven I find you well and strong. But where is Maffeo?" The traveler looked eagerly around, and then the younger boy resolved his anxiety by leaping into his arms. The two boys were clasped close at last to their father's breast. He kissed them on both cheeks, and patted their heads, and lifted their chins with his finger, the better to scan their faces. Then the tears coursed down his bronzed face, and raising his hands aloft, he made a silent prayer of thanksgiving that he had returned home from far distant lands and an absence of many years to find his darling sons alive and well.